Good morning, BookTube, YouTube. This is Johnny. It's been a couple days since I made a video, and I thought I would do it this morning. It is January the 15th. Nope. Yep, it's January the 15th, 2025. It is 10:17 in the morning. Yeah, snow on the ground. Some little patches of blue sky and sunshine. So I thought what I would do is just show you to be read pile. I think I haven't really shown any of my secular books that, yeah, I've been thinking about why. This is one thing I found, I've discovered, well, this is something unusual in my reading life. I have been reading basically my Christian books going on 3 weeks, and I was wondering why. Why do I, it's kind of like I'm really kind of freaked out about the inauguration of Donald Trump, and I'm just kind of like in a state of anxiety, and it's kind of like the only way I can really deal with this whole thing, with the inauguration of Trump, and maybe who knows what he's going to do, is to focus my mind on eternal realities. Maybe that's why I've been reading. But I have, the only thing I've been reading really that's secular is the novel Natural History by Carlos Fonseca. I'm terrible at pronunciation, and you have to forgive me, but I've been reading this, and at night primarily, but during the day I get up in the mornings, and this morning I'm reading the works of Robert William Bridge. I've shown this is volume 1 of his works, and I've been reading his 5 sermons on the spiritual life, which is on, let's see how it goes here. The spiritual life and the in-being of Christ in all believers, in 5 sermons preached at Stephanie and other places in 1648. And so I'm on sermon 4. Now I don't read, as you know my reading habits, I read this one morning and then I'll read something else. Excuse me, I gotta sneeze. So I've been reading this morning. I'm on sermon 4, and it's on that text in Galatians, one of my favorite texts. Galatians is in the New Testament. The New Testament is in the Bible. You have the Old Testament, you have the New Testament, and then Galatians was written by the Apostle Paul, and these 5 sermons by William Bridge is based on this text in Galatians chapter 2. For I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ lives in me. And the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by the faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. So this sermon is based, sermon 4 is Christ lives in me. And so that's what I've been reading this morning in the works of William Bridge. Yesterday, I read in the mornings Schola Pitistis, volume 1 of Johanna Gelhardt. And I've been reading this. I read this yesterday. And so like I said, I've been reading these books and trying to keep my mind on eternal reality, realizing that this world is fading away, that kingdoms come and go, presidents come and go, and that God's sovereign will be accomplished. And so maybe the way I can cope in this waiting to see what will happen after the inauguration of Trump is to read these kinds of books. That's the only thing I can figure out, because I've not been able to get into my nonfiction reading. As you know, my habit has always been to read nonfiction in the afternoons, read biographies, read letters, read novels, and I've only been able to really read books like Sacred Meditations by Johanna Gohart and Meditations on the Life and Passion of Christ by John Tollard, and Martyrs, Monks, and Mystics, Introduction to Christian Spirituality by Michael McLean. So I figured that's the reason why because I'm kind of like, it's like I'm on this fence, and I'm going back and forth, I don't want to flip out, I don't want to go crazy. Since I suffer from depression and anxiety, I'm trying to, by God's grace, in prayer and meditation and contemplation, to just keep my eyes on God in the midst of this time of suspense when I don't know what is going to happen, what Trump will do, because I do think he wants to be a dictator. And so I'm just kind of curious what he will do. And even though it's kind of crazy, because no matter what he does, I can't do anything to change it. Christians wanted him in power, and they voted for him. Trump would not have won the elections if the Christians in America hadn't voted for him. It was the Christians that got him into power, and who are going to be under his dictatorship when he becomes president. And of course, they believe that Trump is the Messiah and that he'll bring in the great America, whatever that is. So I think that's the only reason why I can figure out why I'm only able to read my Christian books. And at night, I have to go to bed. So I have to find something that's a little bit, switch my mind off a little bit. I did come across, I was going to show some used books, but the other day I was at Action House down the street, a thrift store, and I found this book called In Quest of Pentecost. I can't pronounce this Dutch name, but is it Jodocus van Landstein and the Dutch Second Reformation by Carl J. Schrouder, who is a professor here in Holland at Western Theological Seminary. I think that's where he is. Anyway, the book is from Western Seminary Bookstore, and it goes for $30, and I found it for $1. Now, the Dutch Second Reformation there is a whole, at the same time you had the 17th century English Puritans. Over the Netherlands, you had the same kind of Puritan movement, Dutch Puritans or Dutch pietistic writers. And one of them was Jodocus van Landstein. I can't pronounce that name. You have to forgive me. But Christian Reformation Heritage, they did a series called Classics of Reformed Spirituality, and they reprinted some very famous Dutch Puritan works. They translated them out of Dutch and they put them into this book form. This is the one by him, A Spiritual Appeal to Christ's Bride by Jodocus van Landstein, translated by Bartel Escherhout, edited by Joe Arbiki. So I've been reading this. Well, I read this, and I got it out because I've been reading this. It's kind of like reading a Dutch church history. I've read almost 81 pages in this. So I've been rereading parts of this too. They did a whole series of translating very famous Dutch Reformation, the Dutch Second Reformation writings by different men of that time period, ministers, theologians. But when it comes to books that hopefully once then all this is settled and we find out what the future of America will be in the next 4 years under the rule of Trump, maybe I can get back into reading nonfiction. I did get a book in the mail from Amazon last night, Suicides by Antonio de Benedetto, translated by Esther Allen. This is a third volume in a trilogy of Expectation by Antonio de Benedetto. And I showed you over the years, I read the first volume in the trilogy, which was Zuma, and then the last one was The Silent Terror, Silentiary, Silentiary. I read those, and this is the third in the trilogy, and I got it last night from Amazon. And so I've been reading natural history, and these are the other books that are on my to-be-read pile in the living room. I keep my Christian books in my study, and I keep what I'm reading, secular books by my reading chair in our living room. I showed you this book, Invitation to Sociology, Humanistic Perspective by Peter L. Berger. And I was reading a couple of weeks ago A Philosophy of Walking by Frederic Gros. This was translated by John Howe, I think from the French. I think it was French. So I was reading that when I was reading nonfiction. And I was reading The Messiah of Stockholm by Cynthia Ozick. These are things I was reading before I got freaked out and stressed out and living in a state of, trying not to panic or freak out. I was reading these things. The Librarianist by Patrick deWitt. These are things I was reading before, and I was reading Maria Theresa, the Habsburg Empress in Her Time by Barbara Stollberg-Rilinger. This is translated out of German by Robert Savage. So these are things I want to get back into when I can start focusing again, hopefully after the inauguration. Desert Divers by Sven Lindqvist. This is a memoir travel on colonialism in Africa. And I was reading the Kolyma stories by Shalamov. Yeah, I want to get back into these once things settle down. And I was reading A History of the Gulag by Anne Appleton. I just can't focus right now because of what all the political turmoil and uncertainty going on in the country of America. And so I don't know when, but I was reading The Notebook, A History of Thinking on Paper by Roland Allen. So these are things I want to get back into when things settle down. Hopefully things will settle down and I'll know if I'm to barricade myself in the house. Carol says I can't buy any guns, so no guns in the house. Carol always says that if we're going to go in the first sweep. If we're going to die, we'll just die. So those are the things I was reading before last couple of weeks. It's going on 3 or 4 weeks now. But I have been able to read natural history, and I told you I got another used book of his I bought used. I got in Amazon. I'm really enjoying reading this. It is a kind of, it's really well written. Really, I really find it very interesting. So I've been reading this. And I don't know when I'll get into reading this, The Suicides. I just wanted it, I had pre-ordered it because I had read his book, The Zama and The Silent Terrorary. But primarily I've been reading my Christian books, the works of Reverend William Bridge, Volume 1. He was a Puritan. He lived from 1600 to 1670. And I started rereading this last night because I found this at a used bookstore here in town, The Quest for Pentecost. And yeah, Spiritual Appeal to Christ's Bride by Jodocus Van Loonstein. I can't pronounce his name. Reading the Holy Bible. This is one of my Bibles. I like this one because it's large print. I open up the verses and I can meditate upon them. Really enjoying reading Schola Pistis, Volume 1. I showed you Volumes 2 and 3. Sacred Meditations by Johanna Gard. Published by Just and Sinner. Mysticism and the Reformation, 1500 to 1650. Part 1, Volume 6, The Presence of God, A History of Western Christian Mysticism by Bernard McQuinn. Meditations on the Life and Passion of Christ by John Toller. Justin Sinner. And Martyrs, Monks, and Mystic, Introduction to Christian Spirituality by Michael J. McLean. And my wife and I, we finished reading through the Gospel of Mark, and now we're going through the Gospel of Luke. And we then, after we read the Valley of Vision, a collection of Puritan prayers and devotions, and always the Book of Psalms. Yeah, Psalm 1 is, we're always, well, Psalm 23 comes to my mind at these times. It says in Psalm 23, well, it says, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me by still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the path of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." And that's one thing I always have to keep in mind. American history will go by, presidents come and go, kingdoms come and go, wars come and go. I always tell people that world history is drenched and soaked in human blood. But one thing I know, that this world, as I've said, life is brief, the world is passing away. But the psalmist says, "I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." He will dwell in the house of God, in the New Jerusalem, in the city of God, in that world to come. And that's what you have to keep, I suppose, you got to keep that in your mind in these dark and troublesome times. Where can you turn to? I mean, what can you do? And so I just kind of like, maybe that's why I've been reading these Christian books all the time, that I find that they kind of keep me focused on eternal things. So that's what I only can come up with of why I've been reading. I can only read these Christian books. That's the only I can come up with of why I can't get into my nonfiction books. Now, like I said, I've been able to read that novel. That's the only thing I'd be able to read. So, besides the Bible. Now, you can always read that's why I told myself, well, you can read the Bible no matter what state of being you're in. You can be depressed, you can be on your deathbed, you could be in a war zone, you could be being bombed by the Russians, you can be in an American Civil War between the right and the left. You can be in some ghetto in Detroit. You can be in some jungle in Brazil, and you can read the Bible, and God is present, and He can sustain you by His grace in the midst of all the circumstances of one's existence in this wasteland that we find ourselves in. That's why I tell myself. So that's why I've been reading these books, but I do want to get back into reading nonfiction. I just can't focus. I've never been in this kind of state before. I don't know if I'm being manipulated by the media, or I'm just, by nature, I've always been into politics, into world events, American history, especially as I've gotten older, that because I think of the future of our grandchildren, what kind of world we're going to be leaving our grandchildren, and the kind of world that our children, our own married children and their families, what are we giving them as for a future? So maybe these kind of things just press down upon me. So this is 10:39 in the morning in Southwest Michigan. It is 10:39, writing in my paper diary. I'm on page 51 this morning, reading on union with Christ. It's kind of interesting. I'm sitting here and I'm feeling a little freaked, a little woozy, a little full of panic, kind of stressed out. But I know by faith that I'm united to Christ, and Christ lives in me by the Holy Spirit. And so that's what I kind of try to focus on continually throughout the day. And maybe that's why I've not been reading nonfiction. I'm just sitting in a state of suspense, just waiting for the bomb to drop, waiting for whatever is going to happen when Trump runs and takes power. So hopefully nothing bad will happen to America. But I don't know. I think we're headed for the shit's going to hit the fan. That's what I think. But see, when I say things like that, I know by nature I'm very pessimistic. I'm very dark. I don't see the sunny side of life. Even though as a Christian, you're supposed to be full of joy and full of happiness and excited and all this. I'm just waiting for the final curtain to fall. So that's why I always say, come quickly, Lord Jesus, in this whole terrible mess, and bring in the new creation. Bring in the reign of God. Bring in the reign of righteousness and justice and love and mercy. Eradicate all sin and bring in the eternal paradise of God. So that's what's going on here in my reading life. I got a book coming in the mail, another book in the series of classics, Western spirituality. And so I hope you're having a good reading week. I do thank you for your comments. Do thank you for your prayers. And I know people out there don't always agree with me politically, They're kind of excited about Trump becoming president. I know our neighbor next door, I told you, is a deacon in my wife's church, and he just can't wait for Trump to become president. He's all excited. And there are other people here in Holland, Michigan. This is the Republican stronghold where we live in Ottawa County in Michigan. And people just can't wait to see Trump make America great again, which I find to be absolutely absurd. I just shake my head in unbelief. But anyway, enough of my rambling. Once again, I hope you're all doing well. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for your prayers. Do pray that the Lord comes quickly. And so once again, I'll sign off. And until next time, bye.